I've had my fair share of strong opinions about Chris Greer over the years, but today, I have to be honest. Credit where credit is due. Right after roster cutdown day, Greer pulled off not just one, but two absolute steals that could completely reshape the depth of this Miami Dolphins roster. Moves that, in my opinion, feel like highway robbery. So, what exactly happened? Let's break it down. Miami brought in cornerback Julius Brents, who was claimed off waivers from none other than the Dolphins' Week 1 opponent, the Indianapolis Colts. That's right. Not only do you strengthen your own team, but you weaken the team you're about to face. That's a win on two fronts. And it doesn't stop there. The Dolphins also scooped up tight end Greg Dulcich, who the New York Giants had just let go. He joins Miami's practice squad for now, but don't be surprised if he finds his way onto the active roster sooner rather than later. But hey, before we dive deeper into what these two players actually bring to the table, do me a quick favor. If you love keeping up with the latest Miami Dolphins news, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and don't forget to tap the bell icon so you never miss a single update. All right, let's move on to the real breakdown. Now, let's talk about Julius Brents. To me, this move could go down as one of the steals of the season, not just for Miami, but across the entire NFL. This guy is a physical freak. If you don't know much about him, here's the quick rundown. Brents was a second-round pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the very same draft where the Dolphins grabbed Cam Smith. Brents has had his battles with injuries, sure, and he's only been on the field for 11 games so far in his career. But when you look at the measurables, you can't help but get excited. Standing at 6'3" with a 34-inch wingspan, he's exactly the kind of long, athletic corner you dream of adding to your secondary. And check this out. Coming out of Kansas State, he posted a relative athletic score of 9.99. That's nearly perfect. A 41.5-inch vertical, a 9.11 broad jump, and a 4.53 in the 40-yard dash. Explosiveness, length, and speed. He's got it all. The only thing holding him back has been staying healthy. If Miami's staff can keep him on the field, he has the tools to make an immediate impact. The truth is, the only thing holding Julius Brents back from being a true starting corner in this league isn't talent. It's health. His frame, his athletic profile, and his raw tools all scream NFL starter. But the reality is, injuries have already slowed down the early stages of his career. Out of a possible 34 games, Brents has only suited up for 11. The biggest setback came in 2024, when he tore his MCL and meniscus. That injury wiped out almost his entire season, limiting him to just 2 appearances. It's tough to evaluate a player when he hasn't had consistent time on the field, and that's what makes Brent such a wild card. But here's why I think this is such a fascinating move for the Dolphins. If, and yes, it's a big if, Brents can stay healthy, he has the upside to be far more than just a depth piece. He could develop into a reliable rotational corner, and Miami picked him up for next to nothing. No trade, no heavy contract, just a minimum deal with the potential for massive payoff. That's the definition of low risk, high reward. Now, let's look at what he's shown when he has been able to play. In just 565 career snaps, the numbers tell a mixed but intriguing story. He's allowed about 67% completions when targeted. That's not shutdown level, but it's respectable for such a young player who's still learning. The quarterback rating against him sits at 109.8, which is on the higher side. But again, it's not disastrous. What really jumps out are the flashes of playmaking. In those limited reps, Brents already has 5 pass breakups. That shows instincts, length, and the ability to get his hands on the football. He may not be a finished product yet, but you can see the traits that make coaches and front offices believe he can grow into something more. At this point, it's about patience, development, and most importantly, keeping him healthy. If Miami's staff can manage that, Brents could turn into one of those sneaky good finds off the waiver wire that fans look back on and say, how did we get this guy for free? One thing you can't overlook with Julius Brents is his ability to make splash plays. Back in his rookie year, he picked off Trevor Lawrence. Yes, one of the brightest young quarterbacks in the league. He also forced and recovered a fumble on the very same play, showing that relentless pursuit and awareness you want in a corner. That's the kind of playmaking Miami's secondary has desperately lacked. Think about it. The Dolphins struggled mightily last season when it came to generating turnovers. For a defense that has talent, that was a glaring weakness. Brents brings something this team needs: a nose for the football. And when you look across the rest of the cornerback room, you see a pattern. Jack Jones is known as a ball hawk. Rasul Douglas has made a career out of being in the right place at the right time. It feels intentional that Miami is leaning into a more aggressive, turnover-driven identity in the secondary. But Brents isn't just about interceptions and fumbles. His physicality stands out too. At 6'3", with a massive 34-inch wingspan, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. Turn on his tape from Kansas State, and you'll see it. Big hits, press coverage, and a willingness to mix it up at the line of scrimmage. For a Dolphins secondary that's sometimes been criticized for being a bit soft over the past couple of years, that edge is more than welcome. Now, let's be realistic. Brents isn't walking in as a starter. Miami already has its top rotation set with guys like Jack Jones, Storm Duck, and rookie Jason Marshall Jr. and Rasul Douglas, who will likely take on a bigger role once he's fully comfortable with the scheme. And you've got a solid top four. That leaves Brents as CB5 to start the year. And honestly, that's the perfect spot for him. It gives him time to learn the defense, adjust to the speed of the game, and prove he can stay healthy without being thrown straight into the fire. But don't be surprised if, down the line, an injury or a rough stretch for another corner opens the door, and Brents makes the most of it. This is a developmental role for now, but the upside is clear. A player with his size, length, and knack for the football doesn't come around often, especially at the price Miami paid to get him. If we're being honest, this cornerback room looks much stronger than it did just a month ago. There's now a balance of youth, stability, and upside that makes you feel a lot more confident heading into the season. Look at the mix Miami has. Jack Jones is that high upside, high risk type of player. He can either swing a game in your favor or frustrate you, depending on the week. Jason Marshall Jr., the rookie, has flashed plenty of potential and could grow quickly under the right coaching. Then you've got Julius Brents, who's also an upside play, raw in some areas, but his size and athleticism give him a chance to really develop into something special. On the flip side, Storm Duck brings reliability. He may not be a highlight reel corner, but he's disciplined, keeps everything in front of him, and doesn't make the kinds of mistakes that lose football games. Add in Rasul Douglas, the veteran who provides leadership and steadiness, and you've got a cornerback unit that feels complete. There's risk, sure, but there's also enough proven talent to keep things steady. And here's another wrinkle that might work in Miami's favor: inside information. Remember, Brents just spent his entire offseason and training camp with the Indianapolis Colts, the Dolphins' Week 1 opponent. That means he's been in the meetings, studied their playbook, and gone up against their starters in practice. While you can't expect him to give away every detail, you'd be foolish not to pick his brain about tendencies, player habits, and even little things that might give Miami an edge. Even if it's just small tips, that could be valuable come opening week. The bottom line is this: Miami's cornerback room isn't perfect, but it finally feels like it has the right blend of youth, leadership, and depth. And with Brents now in the mix, there's an added layer of intrigue that makes this group one to watch closely as the season unfolds. Now that we've broken down what Julius Brents brings to Miami's cornerback room, let's shift gears to the other recent addition, tight end Greg Dulcich. This is another move that didn't make a ton of national headlines, but for the Dolphins, it could quietly pay off in a big way. Dulcich comes with his own story. A former third-round pick by the Denver Broncos, he's a player who once carried big expectations. Injuries slowed his development and eventually led to him being waived, but the talent has always been there. Miami decided to stash him on the practice squad, and that's a smart play. It gives Dulcich time to get fully healthy, adjust to the Dolphins system, and prove whether he can still be the kind of dynamic pass-catching tight end many believed he would become when he first entered the league. And here's why this matters for Miami. The tight end position has been a bit of a revolving door lately. The Dolphins haven't had a consistent, game-changing presence at that spot in years. If Dulcich can stay on the field and rediscover some of that early promise, he could carve out a real role in this offense. Even if it's just situational, his ability to stretch the field down the seam would give Tua another option and make defenses think twice about stacking against Miami's explosive receivers. This isn't a flashy signing, it's a calculated one. And sometimes, it's those under-the-radar moves that end up making the biggest difference over the course of a long season. We spent the first half of today talking about Julius Brents, but now let's shift our attention to the other under-the-radar pickup, tight end Greg Dulcich, who Miami recently signed to the practice squad. And honestly, this could turn out to be another steal. Here's the background. Dulcich was a third-round pick back in the 2023 NFL Draft, selected 80th overall out of UCLA. He started his career with the Denver Broncos, where he showed flashes of promise, but nagging injuries and inconsistent usage kept him from carving out a big role. By mid-2024, he was waived after being a healthy scratch for several weeks. The Giants scooped him up, and he finished last season in New York before spending the entire offseason and preseason with them. Now, here's why this move matters. Dulcich hasn't had huge production yet, just 2 career touchdowns and around 460 receiving yards, but he has shown signs of what he could be. This preseason with the Giants, he found the end zone 3 times, including 2 in the finale. Sure, those came against backups, but you can't ignore that kind of production. When a tight end starts heating up and scoring opportunities, teams take notice. Clearly, Miami did. Looking at the Dolphins' tight end depth, there's opportunity. The current group doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Between lingering injury concerns and a lack of proven playmakers at the position, Miami is still searching for someone who can give Tua a reliable weapon in the middle of the field. That's where Dulcich enters the picture. He's not on the active roster yet, just on the practice squad. But that's not a bad thing. It gives him time to learn the system, get his body right, and be ready if or when Miami needs reinforcements. And let's be honest, with the way this team's offense relies on balance, having another athletic option at tight end could end up being crucial as the season wears on. This isn't just a filler signing. It's a low-cost, high-upside gamble on a player who once carried real expectations coming into the league. When you look at Miami's tight end depth, the situation feels pretty unsettled. Julian Hill has struggled to make much of an impact, while Tanner Conner might actually be the best receiving option currently on the roster. He's athletic and has upside, but he's still developing. On the practice squad, Miami now carries 2 names, Greg Dulcich and Hayden Rucci. Rucci, the undrafted rookie out of Wisconsin, profiles more as a traditional inline blocking tight end. Dulcich, on the other hand, is the opposite, more of a finesse player who wins as a receiver. And that's where the questions come in. The biggest reason Dulcich lost playing time in Denver was simple: blocking. In today's NFL, a tight end needs to do both. Sure, catching passes is the flashier part of the job, but about 1/3 of the position is helping out in the run game or pass protection. Dulcich hasn't proven he can do that at a high level. As a rookie, he logged over 150 run blocking snaps and graded out poorly, one of the lowest among tight ends that year. That weakness made it hard for Denver to trust him on the field consistently. Even when he flashed as a pass catcher, he wasn't viewed as a complete player. For Miami, though, the equation is different. Mike McDaniel's offense is all about speed and space. A player like Dulcich doesn't need to line up and dominate as a blocker every snap. He just needs to be competent enough to hold his own while providing another receiving option for Tua. If the Dolphins can find ways to scheme him into favorable matchups, his athleticism could add a new layer to this offense. At this point, he's very much a developmental piece, but the skill set is clear. Dulcich can catch the football, stretch the seam, and become a safety valve in the passing game. The challenge will be whether he can round out his game enough to earn consistent snaps. If there's one major flaw in Greg Dulcich's game, it's blocking. The numbers don't lie. Whether in Denver or New York, his grades in run blocking have been among the lowest in the league. And in Mike McDaniel's system, where tight ends are often asked to help in the run game and set the edge, that weakness can't be ignored. It's the biggest hurdle standing between Dulcich and consistent playing time. But here's the flip side, and this is where it gets interesting. As a receiver, Dulcich might already be the most talented tight end Miami has. Think about it. Julian Hill has struggled, Tanner Conner is athletic but unproven, and Darren Waller hasn't been able to stay on the field for 2 years. Compared to that group, Dulcich has real upside. Route running, separation, and the ability to create plays down the seam. Those are areas where he could step in and contribute quickly. That's why this move feels like a smart gamble by Miami. They're not asking Dulcich to be a complete tight end on day one. He's on the practice squad, which gives the team flexibility. If injuries hit, or if the offense is looking for another spark in the passing game, they can elevate him to the active roster without long-term commitment. And if he performs well enough in those opportunities, the Dolphins may have no choice but to keep him on the 53-man roster. So as we round this out, here's the question. Which was the bigger steal? Was it snagging Julius Brents off waivers, a corner with elite traits and upside? Or was it stashing Greg Dulcich on the practice squad?